Bienvenue à vous toutes.
Welcome, welcome everyone. We are going to now start this conference, Israel-Palestine. Can one oppose Israeli policies? We are going to start with an introduction. Firstly, Esther Benbassa will take the floor. She is hosting us here today. Then we will have Shawan Jabarin, director of Al-Haq. It is the largest human rights NGO in Palestine and in the Middle East more generally. Shawan Jabarin is also Secretary General of the International Federation of Human Rights based in Paris. Tsemel, our very determined advocate for human rights. She works tirelessly to defend Palestinians, victims of the occupation. She also brings her help to families who've been separated by the occupation. And she has also received an award for human rights in France. She will be taking the floor later on. But first, I will give the floor to Esther Benbassa, who is hosting us here today. Good morning, everyone. As an environmentalist senator in Paris, it is my pleasure to welcome you here today and to host this conference organized by the AFPS today. And I would like to salute the president of this organization, Mr. Bertrand Heilbronn. He has been working tirelessly for months on this conference, and we have exchanged so many emails and so many phone calls, and I know for a fact that he has worked very hard to organize this conference. I'm very happy to see so many of you here, so many friendly faces, and I will give you a brief introduction and then give you the floor and give you the time to reflect upon this issue, a very sensitive issue, especially for me as a politician. And I would like for this day to unfold in a very friendly atmosphere. The title we chose, Israel-Palestine, Can One Oppose Israeli Policies, poses a question. I would answer yes spontaneously, provided that, provided that anti-Semitism and denunciation of Israeli policies are not one and the same. Provided that we are careful when it comes to opposing Israeli policies and its possible abuse. I also think that we should not make generalizations, notably generalize about Jews in Europe and make links with Israel. But there are peaks of anti-Semitism in France that we need to talk about, and I have a few figures. There was a surge of anti-Semitic acts in 2000 after the Second Intifada, or after 2009 after the Israeli offensive on Gaza. In 2014, after the operation in Gaza, once again, there were violent acts against the Jewish community in France. There was a surge of over 130%, sorry. So the figures speak for themselves, and they show that there is a link between these two issues. We were also able to see this when Trump decided to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. We also observed in Europe a spike of generalizations, and notably the 10th of December in Germany. After the announcement was made, Israeli flags were burned in Berlin, and anti-Semitic insults were also made in front of the Brandenburg Gate. In Sweden, there was a similar phenomenon as well after this announcement once again. I don't want to exhaust you with these examples, but clearly there is an issue, and one can't deny this issue. We must dissociate opposing Israeli policies and anti-Semitism, and maybe that this distinction is quite blurry, and this is why our conversation today is important. So if we ask the question today, it is also because those of us who express this concern are aware that this is a very slippery slope. On the other hand, the Jewish community, or a large part of the Jewish community, is very sensitive to opposing or the opposition to Israeli policies. Now, of course, the members of the Jewish community who are sensitive to criticism are larger in numbers than those who oppose Israeli policies. And because they are more numerous, they may give the impression that they are right, but we know for a fact that this is not the case. So firstly, members of the community are supposedly victims of anti-Semitism, and we are once again in very dangerous territory where we are opposing victims against victims, and this is a war where everyone loses. When we say that Israel is the first anti-Semitic country in the world, this is not something that helps the cause. On the contrary, I noticed that one of the roundtables is about whether there is a specifically French problem, and I would say yes. And I would also say that the contemporary history of France also proves this. And there is a specifically French evil, whether in the right-wing or left-wing parties. And of course, we know that this is used as an excuse by Israeli policies and also by defenders of Israeli policies. We need to be able to have a constructive criticism, and this constructive criticism should not require or demand the annihilation of the Israeli state. It should demand a Palestinian state side by side with the Israeli state. Our ambitions are great, and the hurdles are difficult. This is one of the last anti-colonial struggles of the far left. Because this struggle is so difficult and so important, we should not fall into the trap of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism exists. We have a very rich day ahead of us with this conference, and I think that it would be a good idea to not fall into the trap of this war of victims. Today, we will be talking about the victims of those who are being accused of anti-Semitism. And we will call for an ethical position that will make sure that we don't fall in the trap of anti-Semitism. We want to convince the Jewish community in France that we have the right to oppose Israeli colonialist policies. But we must be aware, if we cannot convince the Jewish community here, we must be convinced that it is our duty to do so. And we have to have the courage and the honesty to criticize those who fall in the trap of anti-Semitism. And I would like to pay tribute here to your courage, to your ethics, your sense of ethics, and your moral compass. And I would like to call for you to reflect upon this question, to have an in-depth reflection on this issue, so that we are not considered as losers, because that's what we're considered as today. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, cher.
Thank you, Madam Senator. Thank you, Esther Benbassa. Thank you for these wise words. Thank you for having us here at the Palais de Luxembourg for our conference today. Should I move closer to the microphone? Maybe I'll just leave it to the operators. Can everyone hear me? Yes, I would like to say, Madame Esther Benbassa, that what you're doing here today is an act of political courage, and we would like to commend your political courage. I would also like to tell you, Madame Benbassa, that we do not intend to be victims. We are here today to conquer the right to freedom of expression. We are not here to complain. We are not here to pose as victims. We are here to win the struggle. I would like to start by greeting Shawan, Jabarin, and Tsemel, who come from afar. Ms. Rebecca Wilmerson, who is the Executive Director of Jewish Voice for Peace. She's here from the United States just for us. Round of applause. Please stand up, Rebecca. And Mr. Hugh Lanning, the chair of our sister organization, the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, who is also here for us today and made it all the way from the UK. I would also like to greet Mr. Salman El-Helfi, the ambassador of Palestine in France. I would also like to greet all of the participants who have worked hard for this conference. You will be able to listen to them later today. And also all of our friends who are here today from different countries, from the Netherlands, from Luxembourg, from other countries, in order to find out about what is being done in France about this issue, a struggle that is dear to our hearts here in Europe. Shawan, Jabarin, and Tsemel are here today because they will remind us that international solidarity with the Palestinian people is a moral imperative, it is a duty, and it is a necessity. Also for us, it goes much beyond the right that we demand to be able to express our solidarity. Esther Benbassa has just recalled how complex this issue is. We will take this complexity into account. We will never accept for individuals to be targeted in our country because of their cultural, linguistic, or ethnic and religious identity. Racism and anti-Semitism is a form of racism. Anti-Semitism, we wonder if there is a surge again of racism and anti-Semitism, and how can we fight against this in our struggle? And this is what we want to talk about today. Now, to talk about our question here today, can one oppose Israeli policies here in France? Now, of course, we are in a country where freedom of expression is enshrined in the Constitution, and it is a right protected by the European Court of Human Rights. But it is also a freedom that is being challenged, and we will be analyzing mechanisms of the attack on this right. There's ordinary intimidation, there's disparagement, being excluded from the media, being associated with shameful and disgraceful adjectives. Us activists who are used to it know how to face these attacks, even if it's very painful. But how will most journalists and most Palestinians react? we have to face gratuitous disparagement, and this is something that's very difficult to fight against. And this leads to the fear of expressing oneself. It leads to self-censorship, and it leads to casting this heavy lid that we often feel upon us when we want to talk about Israel and Palestine. And we did notice that there was a deplorable chapter of this offensive, notably when the CRIF and l'ICRA required that numerous individuals who were candidates to the La République En Marche list, to the general elections, be removed from the list because they had called for the boycott of Israeli products. Calling for BDS, of course, it is a focus point of this debate. So BDS, boycott for citizens, divestment for firms, and sanctions by states. Now, we have with us Maître Comte, a lawyer who will be explaining the details of the right to BDS. Now, of course, one can consider whether this is the most useful way of fighting against Israeli policies. One can decide to adopt it or not, and we know that in this room there are divergent views about this. We can also be more selective about the targets, and that's part of the democratic debate. However, we do refuse demonization of BDS, and we also refuse the confirmation that the boycott is banned in France, because this is erroneous. The European Court of Human Rights must also give a judgment on this issue. The BDS campaign is the target and the excuse used by Israel against all of those who oppose its policies. And we are now in a new arena in February 2016. That is when Gilad Erdan, the Minister of Strategic Affairs, created and financed a department in Israel whose purpose is to fight against organizations involved in BDS and to fight against anyone opposed to the Israeli policies. We are therefore now in open war, and in February 2016 we discovered that we were the direct target of an ideological war, a war waged by the Israeli government against us as individuals and against our organizations. It is a war that is waged on a global level, as will tell us more about it Leah Tsemel, Rebecca Wilkemerson, and Hugh Lanning. And the repercussions were soon to be seen in France. We have received death threats and have lodged complaints. We have also seen that anti-Semitism was equated to anti-Zionism, and this is an attitude started in January 2016 by the Prime Minister at the time, and this happened again. Dominique Vidal wrote about this, and he will be making a presentation later on. An unprecedented offensive was launched to ensure that a definition of anti-Semitism would be adopted, a definition that would be associated with opposing the State of Israel and its policies. It is a definition that was recommended by the European Parliament on the 1st of June. It was the IHRA definition. It is the story of a scam, a quite dangerous one. And we will be talking about this all day long today. Fabienne Messica will talk about it, and Hugh Lanning will be making a presentation about this as well. Recent events also show that this offensive is on its course and intensifying. In November, elected officials of our country were banned from entry in Israel and in Palestine. They had required to visit Marwan Barghouti. We consider Marwan Barghouti as the Palestinian Nelson Mandela. Recently, in January, 20 organizations, of which our organization, were mentioned in a blacklist published by the Israeli government, and it is a privilege that we share with other great organizations such as Jewish Voice for Peace and Palestine Solidarity Campaign. Both organizations are here today, and they will be taking the floor later on this afternoon. We are very happy to be here today, and we would also like to greet our friends from BDS France who are here and who are also on the list. But let's get back to business. a state is starting to decide in our own country who they like and who they don't like. And they've made this list public, and we have to talk about what that implies. Recently, on the 26th of January, our PayPal account was closed down, and the Zakor Legal Institute was quite happy about this. Following this act, there were articles of propaganda in Israeli and French media. We are being targeted today as individuals, but it is also our ability to have a conversation and act in France which is under threat. We can no longer proceed on a case-by-case basis. We must now attack. We must change our rhetoric. We owe this to our Palestinian friends, but we also owe it to our democracy, to the democracy of our country. It is the purpose of our conference, and it is the purpose of the initiative which will be launched here today. 6 principles for a democratic conversation on the Israel-Palestine issue in France, and we will introduce them, present them at 5 at the end of the day. Thank you very much, and now I will give the floor to Shawan Jabarin.
Thank you, Bertrand. Good morning, everybody, and I would like to thank AFPS on their invitation and organizing this conference. And also I would like to thank Madame Benbassa for her introduction and for her also hosting this conference. This is the second time for me in this place, and maybe I came here a few months ago. And we discussed on other things, and I returned back with a big hope that there is something going on here, which is very, very important, and it will be reflect not just on our case, but it will reflect positively to the values and the principles that France and different, countries, they do believe about it, and I think it's a time to defend these values and these principles. I look at the faces here in this hall. I see fathers, mothers, grandfathers, grandmothers. What's missing in this audience is the young generation. The question here, I think, is what we would like to send, which message that we would like to send to our children, to the youth, to the young generation in general. Do we want to send them a message saying that you have no right to criticize, you have no right for freedom of expression, you have no right to say no, and the doors closed before you, and the only door open before you is violence and force and things like that? I think our conference is very, very important. And when I heard the question, of this conference and the main objective behind this conference, I prepared a few things in my mind. I prepared my speech, but unfortunately last night my computer falling down, and I lost. But everything is in my mind, not on papers. I would like to share with you 2 things. One, a few months ago, there is a man, a boy, he's around maybe 19, 20 years old, near Ramallah. The Israeli claimed that he threw stones on them, and the jeep, the Israeli military jeep, followed him. And the accident, it happened an accident, and this boy, he was under the jeep. And the Israeli for 2 hours refused, to take the jeep, and he died. His father, he thought that the man he is under the jeep, he is not his son. And he tried to push, the soldiers and the officers just to move the jeep, to let them to move a jeep. He died. A few weeks after that, the Israelis sent to the family, a decision to pay 192,000 shekels. Why? For maintaining the jeep, to maintain a jeep, really. This is a real story. I'm responsible for every word I'm saying here in this case. Just the family, they complained to us, and they said, what to do? You know, now they're asking us to pay money, and we lost our son, and they didn't even let us to move a jeep from his body, and he died there. Just you can imagine till when, you know, things like that, to which extent going to that area. Another thing is Gaza. Gaza, I'm not speaking about only killings and house demolitions and the seen things. There are unseen destruction of the society in Gaza. More than 2 million people. Just you can imagine a man, he is 30 years old, he's strong, he's healthy, come to you and say, I'm not a beggar. Could you please just give me, you know, a meal to feed myself? This is, you know, our people in Gaza reach that level these days. It's a long-term destruction of Palestinian society in Gaza and elsewhere. That's part of the story. I don't want to go in details about that. But to criticize that and to speak about these crimes and asking for accountability and to hold the criminal accountable, you become as a terrorist or anti-Semitic or something like that. I don't know how it comes, these things. It's not just in Palestine, Israel, you know, the shrinking of space. What I feel these days, when I come to Paris, I come in regular basis every 2-3 months, and I hear, you know, stories from people here. When I hear that, even before, that calling for BDS, it's, you know, illegal, and criminalizing, you know, those they are calling for this. I said, wow, isn't this in France? They do believe about freedom of expression, democracy. This is a pillars in their life as a values and as a principles. This is what shocked me, to be honest. When I go to Brussels and I start, you know, hearing that there is a discussions about anti-Semitic, Zionist, things like that, I said, wow, it's not just the shrinking space is in different areas. And this is what concerned me. And it sent me back to the Second World War. It was a catastrophe at that time. And it wake up, you know, the conscience of the people at that time. Because of that, they developed the international law, they developed the idea of human rights at that time, and the principles. And they said, wow, do we need also, again, you know, another world war to wake up our conscience and our beliefs about all of these things? Why? Why it's happened like this these days? I know that there is Trump era, things like that, but the question here is, this is the main idea that I have. When you defend Palestinians' rights, and when you come to defend justice and the human rights and equality, you defend your society and you defend your values and you defend your principles. That's the case. It's not just defending Palestinians' rights. Defending Palestinians' rights is a test. Is a test of your values, is a test for your principles, is a test of the future of your society. This is the case in Palestine. If you let, for instance, Israelis to go and to commit international crimes without holding them accountable and enjoying an impunity, I think this is a destruction not just in Palestine. This is a destruction of the values and the principles and the future of these countries. If you don't give a meaning to the international law, justice, equality, human rights, accountability, all of these things, this is also another concern. It has to concern you. That's the case. I'm not here, just speaking, oh, please, could you please just help us? No, I say, could you please help yourself? Could you please help yourself from the wave of the rightist groups, from the wave of criminality, from the wave of the destruction of all of these principles and values? That's the issue, you know. And this brings me to the young generation. Again, I think now, for instance, in Palestine, 75% of the Palestinians under 29 years old. Just you can imagine, under 29 years old, 75% of them. Under the oppressive regime, occupation, restrictions, all of these things, and in the same time, they don't see protection provided to them by occupying power, by international community, by anyone. And here there is a message. They ask us, what do you think by international law? What it means, you know, what it means that if Israel doing all of these things and no one stopped them, no one intervened. Okay, they condemning them, they continue condemning that by words, but no change on the ground. And they lost their hope. And you speak about around 75%, also 70% unemployed, mainly from those they graduated from the Palestinian universities, unemployed. And they can't enjoy anything. And most of them, they think to leave a country. This is an issue, for instance. How we can just maintain hope in the minds of the young generation? How can we maintain, you know, the future in their mind? This is, I think, a very, very important thing for our people. And when France, for instance, take a position, or the international community or any European country take any position, also it gives us an issue to speak about and to say, look, guys, you are not alone. There are people taking care of your situation here, and you have to engage with them. And you have to give, you know, let me say, peaceful ways a chance. And I mean by peaceful way is international law. This is an issue. We use it. And if we say, no, we have nothing, all things closed, because when we say anything, the Israelis try to silence us. A few days ago, I showed a program in the Israeli TV about one of the civil society organizations doing work in lands, just to help, you know, Palestinian peasants and Palestinian farmers in their lands. Yeah. And in that program, one of the settlers, he's a spokesperson, he said, we follow them. They want to create facts on the grounds. This is against Oslo principles. Wow. To help, you know, the farmers to work in their lands. This is a creation of facts on the ground, and this is against Oslo. And what's about the settlements? What's about the eviction of Palestinian civilians from their land? What's about killings? What's about, you know, cutting off Gaza from the rest of West Bank? What do you call it? You call it this is in a consensus with Oslo agreement and the agreements with the Palestinian side? This is the case. Just you can imagine if the Israelis, they have a right as Palestinians have a right, for instance, in their land, and the international law, it's on their side, what they can do. That's an issue. I think it's a time, in my point of view, it's a time to defend that. And at the same time, when I see, you know, the campaign against the solidarity groups, the civil society organizations coming from different governments, different rights groups, I say it's a time for all the solidarity groups, for everybody for all those they do believe about justice and human rights to be united in the face of this horrible campaign, and we have not to let them to success in that, because we defend the future of our children, the future of our society. And here there is a question for the government, for the state of France. Do you want to play the role and to lead the role to defend the principles of humanity, justice, rights, international law? Or do you want to follow the Israelis and the Americans these days by saying that we have our, our international law, and we don't recognize that, and they try to give different meaning to these principles? I think it's a time to play this leading role. Another thing is, I will finish by saying, regarding the recognition of Palestine state, also it's a time. It's a time to give a meaning to the principles and to the position that they have been repeating since so long, that they do believe about two-state solution. If you do believe about two-state solution, the Israelis now, they are killing the two-state solution. How you can defend that? Could you please just recognize that? Could you please just give a meaning to the two-state solution? By doing that, you maintain hope in people's minds, and you send the message to the Israelis as an occupying power to say that we don't recognize what you do. And this is a practical meaning. It's not just to continue repeating two-state solutions without any meaning. I think it's a time for the recognition of the two-state solution. Just by doing that, you can send a clear message to the Israelis that we are standing behind international law, behind the decisions and resolutions that we voted for. The last point that I have is just we keep hope with all of this gloomy situation. We keep hope. I do believe that the future is for justice. I do believe that this situation will change for sure, but it can change if there is a solidarity, if there is unity, and if there is a struggle in the face of oppressive regimes and all of the forms of violations of international law, and when we support and stand behind the justice and the humanity and democracy and give a meaning to that. When we criticize Israel, we criticize the state's actions. We criticize the policies of crimes. We criticize the crimes. That's the case. And I think here we differentiate well between the practice of the state and Jewish Israel. Who can say that Israel actions supported by Jewish everywhere over the world, and even by the Jewish inside Israel? These days, the Jewish inside Israel, even the Zionist liberals, they are not accepted by this government. They are going after and trying to silence us and silence the Israeli civil society organizations, human rights organizations, by drying their funding, by restricting their access in different ways, by asking, internationals and officials to stop supporting them. I finish by thanking the German foreign minister, Dutch foreign minister, Norwegian foreign minister, Irish foreign minister because they were against the Israelis when they asked them not to support a civil society, and they said, we have a different point of view when it comes to the civil society and when it comes to the settlement actions. Thank you so much, and I wish you the best in your conference and the success in your conference. Thank you.
Un grand merci à vous, Shawan Jabarin.
Thank you very much, Shawan Jabarin, for this contribution. It was very important for you to put things in a specific context and make clear that the link between what's happening in Palestine and what's happening here is important. Throughout the day, you will be our witness, and you will be able to react to our different roundtables. So now I'll give the floor to Leah Tsemel. Leah Tsemel will speak much longer this afternoon to talk more precisely about the situation in Israel. But it seemed to us very important that at the beginning of this conference, she was able to take the floor and take what the progressist Israeli think about the situation here.
I have to speak in English. And I will try to be quite short. They gave me 5 minutes. Generally speaking, I'm trying to look at the last 50 years. There is 50 years of occupation, out of which in the last 46 years until today, I'm an active defense lawyer. And I thought I will bring you some pictures from here and there about this perspective. We take 10 steps back and look at the situation. And the first issue that is important, maybe I'll talk about later on again, was, in 1972, a group of leftist Israelis, together with some leftist Palestinians, built a group, and they tried to join the PLO, to be part of the Palestinian struggle for a better society against occupation. They were, of course, arrested, sentenced for 17, 15, etc. years, and that phenomenon that started at that time died away, faded away. Today, when we ask what are the Israelis doing against the occupation, the Israelis are mainly acting as the backbone of the opposition to the occupation. They would be supporters in Na'alin, in Mil'in, of different struggles of the Palestinian, popular struggles of the Palestinians. Women, Israeli women, will be in the roadblocks, Mahsom Watch, in the courts, trying to see and supervise. Ta'ayush, the group you spoke about, will try to help some peasants to gain their land. It's all a secondary action of trying to defend those elementary human rights. There's no participation in a popular struggle, of course. Another picture, another angle, I would say. I remember very, very well that all those, the beginning years of the occupation, the Palestinians related to us, the Israelis, according to what we were then. It could be women, men, settlers, soldiers, policemen, civilians. We had names, we had group names. Nowadays, we have one name only. If I interview a young boy, let's say from Nablus or from Jerusalem, from the old city, I would ask, okay, tell me what happened to you. And he would say, I was sitting at home, I was sleeping in my bed at 4 o'clock in the morning, for instance. Someone knocked at the door. My mother opened. It was the Yahud, El Yahud. So whatever differentiation used to be, it ended. It's all El Yahud. Even those Druze border police who are involved every day with this security are El Yahud. So I would say, what is it? Is it such a success of Zionism? it's a great success. This tragedy, turning all of the oppression, whoever it is, to El Yahud. So did they succeed to make it the state of the Jewish people? You know, there are different laws, we'll talk about it in the afternoon, that say whoever denies that Israel is the state of the Jewish people will get these and those sanctions. So did they turn us to the state of the Jewish people? And at the same time, did they turn the Jewish people, the Jews of the state? Because if we look at the tragic in Toulouse, for instance, what was it? The Jews of the Israeli state, in a way, apropos anti-Semitism, that will also be another subject, long subject today. But this is the angle we can see very clearly. Another point, geographical point perhaps, what they call the Mount Temple, Al-Aqsa, became the center of the last 10 years' struggle. The Orthodox Jews tried to rebuild probably the temple, to go on the mountain, it became really a center. There are different groups who build aside the temple. There are different groups who practice how to pray again and how to accomplish all the old ancient laws of being with the temple. At the same time, there are Muslims who try to preserve the rights on the Mount Temple, and the Murabitun, Murabitat, all people who made it a cause to sit there and learn and just exist there. And you should understand that also they were declared as an illegal organization, terror organization, and they are sentenced accordingly. Just 2 weeks ago, I was called on Shabbat to come very quickly to the Kishle police in the old city, because 6 Americans, 3 men and 2 women, were arrested in Al-Aqsa because they said Allahu Akbar, Muslim Americans. I came to the police. I told them, okay, you'll probably be released. You didn't make any offense. What shall I tell you? What can I tell you? And then there was this picture that is very symbolic for me. They wanted to pray. They told me, please ask the police to allow us to pray. And I said, Lewis, this is the praying time, let them pray. They went out on the yard of this police station. Around them, there were the border police, some of them Druze, some of them Muslim Arabs, some of them Israeli police standing with their rifles. Everyone had its own rifle. And all of them prayed together, it was a real demonstration, that prayer. And it was over. They came back in. They were released later on at night. But though they were arrested because they are foreign Muslims. We'll talk later again about what I see as a campaign against foreigners just as well, not only against Palestinians, against Israelis. Shawan, I look at him, I listen to him, and I'm sorry to say, yes, my dear, we are losers in a way. Sorry. Because if 50, 40, 30 years ago, we believed that we are the progressive power, right? That we are the promise. We can really bring about together, Jews and Arabs acting together, we can bring about another society, combined society. Right now, it doesn't exist. We are oppressed. And all the attempts, as you mentioned, of building civil society and shifting from politics, that is dangerous because it's terror, into human rights organizations, as many of us did, both on the Israeli side, both on the Palestinian side, we realized that the settlers, the apartheid people, the right-wing people, they won. Until now, they won. And just to compare between the Ariel University in the occupied territories, in a settlement, illegal settlement in the West Bank, is flourishing and opens even a medicine faculty college. On Al-Quds University, that is in Abu Dis, not in Jerusalem, although it's called Al-Quds, there is a museum on the name of our jihad of the prisoners, and just 1 month ago, the police entered, took off the pictures from the walls, made it as it's in its own house, and stole some material. And what? Nothing. The right wing found out what is the power of law. And I'm talking to the lawyers around, but it's a fantastic phenomenon. They realized that all you have to do, just change the law. You have a majority, a new law. Easy, very easy. In Jerusalem, just for instance, before I came, there are 2 settlements in Atur that are causing agony to the Palestinian inhabitants. Oh, now they want to build a promenade between one settlement to the other settlement. Very easy. The municipality will issue a law. And then to separate from Jerusalem, there are too many Palestinians in Jerusalem. It's intolerable. In order to separate it so that it doesn't get into the statistics that the half of the population is Palestinian in Jerusalem, they will just cut parts of Jerusalem and declare it another municipality, a law. And so, in brief, I have to finish. I really feel, me personally, that try to be active as a socialist and still active as a lawyer and to build some new society. Meanwhile, fshilna, nechad al-et. Until now, we didn't do it. And yeah, on the contrary, I do say, help us to help ourselves. Thank you.
We will wait.